Right, so the numbers are pretty much the same. 47 new cases, active cases up slightly, although the good news is hospitalizations are down. There was two new deaths, which is not the best thing to happen, but they were both older people, I heard. So, not, I mean, not like I've mentioned a million times, not that that's a good thing, but if you're dying in your 70s or 80s, well, you're already living as long as the average person to begin with. So, like I said, I've said it a lot of times, but I'm going to say it again. I think it's very insane to suggest that people that have their entire lives ahead of them be forced to suffer to add on a incredibly small amount of time onto people's lives who already have lived the average age. So that really doesn't make any sense. And that's just one of the many reasons to be against the full lockdowns. The one thing though is that they have slowed down testing a little bit, so hopefully they pick that up again. But again, the numbers are pretty much the same. Again, the stuff that's been in the news is the numbers out of the states. They had another high day yesterday, 55,000 cases. But again, there's more stuff to it here. They did have a higher number as day as far as deaths go. They had about 900. Actually, looks like just under 1,000. So that's not a good thing. But keep in mind, again, it is just one day, and my guess is that um, some of this is definitely because of the protests. Some of it is definitely because of the 4th of July. But keep in mind, it was only the 7th yesterday. That's only 3 days difference. So the average incubation period, I think, is about 5 days. So if the 4th of July caused a bunch of cases, we will be expecting to see it within the next week or so. So I guess we'll see as far as that goes. But um, the numbers are out of the states are something that you need to be a little bit worried about. But on the other hand, it's still not something that we need to be overly worried about for the simple reason that the deaths count or the average deaths still hasn't gone up too much. And we know at this point that locking things down isn't the solution. It just really isn't. So that is the other thing to keep in mind as far as the numbers out of the states go. But the big news yesterday was Andrew Scheer got caught at, I don't know what airport it was, probably Ottawa or maybe wherever he's from. I think he's from Saskatchewan. Um, anyway, the whole point being is that he wasn't wearing a mask. Actually, in fact, it was in Ontario because they were mad because Ontario has this mask order, and he wasn't wearing it. So it must have been Ottawa, or Toronto, probably Ottawa. But nonetheless, everyone's up in arms, at least on the mainstream media. And I mean, the original CBC quote that reported it got ratioed completely. Now, if you don't know what ratioed means, on Twitter, you can either like, subscribe, or not. You can either like, retweet, or you can comment. I mean, technically, you can retweet and comment, and you can do everything if you really wanted. But what ratioed means is generally when a tweet gets more comments than it does likes or even retweets. Usually, you get more likes than you do retweets. So if you get more comments than you do likes, that's an example of a tweet that got heavily ratioed because, in other words, more people largely disagree with the tweet than actually agree. So anyway, that's basically what I want, the whole ratio thing when it came to CBC. And the whole point that I wanted to bring up is, and I think most people would agree, even if you're on the left, you should agree with this. Um, why in the world is this a big issue? This is one man in the airport who was, I mean, I don't know if he was socially distancing the whole time, but at the time he was sitting across from some people. He probably had a good 7, 8 feet in between him and the nearest person. Like, why is it a big issue? Again, this is the other thing too that not only did we go from masks don't work, don't wear masks, in April or in March and going into April, we've also went from, oh, social distancing is the key to preventing the spread, to now, oh, apparently social distancing doesn't work either because Andrew Scheer was socially distancing. And here's the other thing too is that masks aren't this end all be all. I really, really don't get it because um, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it really doesn't make any sense. If masks are this end all be all, single handedly prevent the virus, then why in the world did we shut down in the first place? And not only that, too, like, why in the world couldn't we have opened, in early May, late April? Like, this was in March that the government said don't wear a mask because they don't work, when in reality they said it because, I mean, they don't work to an extent, but in reality they said that because they weren't stocked up themselves. So why in the world didn't we stock up and reopen? Like, again, either way it makes no sense. You can't even make that argument that um, even if someone says why didn't we stay open? Well, at the very least we should have opened in like late April, early May, because that would have given the government a month to stock up on masks. Like, that's plenty of time. So the idea doesn't make any sense. And again, this is literally just um, Andrew Scheer is a conservative. We're going to find any reason we possibly can to attack him. And regardless of whether or not you agree with Scheer, I didn't even vote for the Conservatives last election, so you can't play the "oh, you're just biased" card. Um, you can't make that argument. But the whole point being is Justin Trudeau is involved in yet another scandal. Not only that, the country has the highest unemployment in the G7. Like, I mean, regardless of that, it is very high unemployment. We are going to be running literally the biggest deficits in Canadian history by far. Like I say, we have tons of people out of work. We literally are one of the biggest catastrophes facing the country in its history, probably. And we have a mainstream media that's worried about Andrew Scheer not wearing a mask in an airport. Like, are you serious? Like airports are ghost towns these days. Like, the only people that are flying are people that absolutely positively need to fly for their jobs, basically. Like, I don't know anyone who's going on holiday. If they are going on holidays, they're doing it close by, right? Like, no one's going on holidays to a foreign country. Um, so anyway, or even cross country. So that's the thing, is that the chances of getting it in an airport, and not to mention too, airports are probably somewhere, especially nowadays, are somewhere that's very sanitary, that are cleaned very often. Like, it's just so insane that this is what we're worried about. And regardless of whether or not you want to downplay the Trudeau we scandal, it doesn't that doesn't even matter. We have massive unemployment. We're facing massive deficits. Like, I don't even care what you think about the whole scandal. Like, that should be the focus. Like, every waking hour should be spent on how do we um, cut down on our unemployment? How do we cut down on our debt? Like, that's what every waking minute should be spent on, not on stupid masks. Like, come on, like, it's so insane. This is from Senator Rand Paul. Again, he is also a doctor, too, so I'd just like to point that out. He says, a must read, finally, an expert with a healthy dose of common sense willing to publicly say that children rarely transmit the virus due to it to adults, and kids should be go back to school. Now, again, it's not looking like a lot. I mean, most colleges, in fact, I don't know one college in my area, and I don't know, I've hardly heard of any that are going to have in-person classes this fall, and even the winter spring semester. So not only that too, we got the public schools, who I think it's kind of up in the air at this point whether or not they go back, how they go back, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever for two reasons. Number one, people under the age of 20 less likely to die of the virus than the flu. And the other thing too is that they're very, very, very unlikely to transmit it to the adults that would be teaching them or working at said school. So, in other words, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever to not send people back. I think the reality is that, I mean, if you go to a public school, you don't want to go back to school. Like, I mean, who wants to go to school? Like, when you were in school, like, probably 80% of kids would rather not go. And the teachers don't want to go either, because well, they don't know for sure, but they know most likely that their salaries will be paid either way. So why in the world would they want to actually have to do the work to earn their ill-gotten salary? Why would they want to do the work? So again, then no one wants to do it. And the other thing too is that the professors are the same way too. Like, I see all these idiots on social media complaining about, "Ooh, tuition is still going up, or it's staying the same. Like, why is this happening?" Well, the reason is that you refuse to point out that teachers and professors make more than they're worth, and you refuse to point out that your fancy education isn't worth as much as you think it is. And that's the thing when it comes to the whole college tuition thing, is that um, it's the prices aren't going to go down until people stop going, and like it's not going to happen. And that's the problem too, is that the same people who complain about the prices are the same people who think that going to college is this absolute necessity in life, which the only reason that even comes close to making that true is that the people who are hiring for jobs have drank that Kool-Aid. And that's the really bad part about it. So anyway, this is from Tim Pool. Now he says Trump tries to withdraw our troops from Afghanistan, and now I'm supposed to oppose the move because Russia wants it. F you, bring our troops home. Now, again, we're at the point to where people, again, it's the same thing with masks, but the left in the 2000s and going into the 2010s were the most, like, they're incredibly anti-war. They're all over Bush about, oh, he's pro-war. Bush is pro-war. We hate Bush because he's pro-war. But yet now, these are the same people who are have completely flip flopped. They're against bringing the troops home because Russia's for it and because Trump is for it, and they're big on John Bolton, who was literally one of the guys who headed up these foreign wars, who's indirectly responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. This is who the left is siding with now. And I'm not big on taking sides, and I know that the centrists out there love Reagan on people for your team against my team, and they love Reagan on people for that. But there's some things where you have to take a side in life, and this is one where you have to do that. The only reason that the left is against this is because Trump is for it. And I mean, you see the same stuff in Canada too, like Jason Kenney. Like, if he takes a position on something, you go through the comments, I'll bet you any amount of money, there'll be people criticizing him for some reason or taking the opposite position. I mean, he literally came out yesterday and said, "Yeah, we're bringing in a solar farm in where the old airport used to be in Edmonton," and there's people criticizing him for it. Like again, like there's nothing they can do to change these people's minds. Like, and here's the thing too, just to prove it, at least from my point of view, if Justin Trudeau came out tomorrow, and I mean, just give you an example, let's say scrap that stupid gun ban they implemented or got rid of existing gun control, I would make a video praising Justin Trudeau. If Justin Trudeau um, expanded free speech, got rid of hate speech laws, I would make a video praising him. I mean, it would have to be tacit praise because he's at one point supported it. And the difference here too is that Trump never supported the Iraq War. He wrote a book in like 20 years ago talking about how bad of an idea it was. So it's a completely different situation. But nonetheless, yeah, like how does this make any sense? Like again, that's just where the mainstream media and where the left is at these days. So this is again something that's kind of a never-ending thing nowadays. In that about a week ago, LA Mayor Garcetti admits connection between virus outbreak and protests after downplaying link. And then you look at this headline out of Forbes.com. Research determines protests did not cause spike in virus cases. Now, again, like how in the world can people honestly take these contradictions seriously? We have um, the mayor of one of the big, it may even be the biggest city in the states, admitting that there is a connection, but then we have another article literally the same day out of a major outlet um, saying research determines protests did not cause spike in the virus. And we have CNN doing the same thing. Again, like how in the world do these people like I mean I don't want to say sleep at night, but how do they look themselves in the mirror and actually have some sincerity and some any sort of a moral compass? Like it doesn't, and here's the thing too is that I think it's safe to say that by default, and no matter what it is, if massive amounts of people gather in confined spaces, there will be an increase in cases from it. It's just a question of how big or how much of the increase does the protests explain. And I think the reality is, like I've been saying all along, it is a small difference. And here's the thing too. Again, people are trying to say, "Oh, I'm always biased." Well, there's the people that I really largely don't agree with, who I'm in a way defending in that I don't think that the Black Lives Matter protests had that much of a difference. I think it is some difference. I've said that the difference probably explains probably 10, 20, maybe 25%. But we're talking about, the states having about double as many cases as they were having before now. So that's probably explains like five, maybe upwards of, 5,000 of the 25,000 cases of the increase. So I think the other big part is the fact that they're just testing a heck of a lot more people. So I think that between those two things, that's probably the majority of it. And the other thing too is that there probably is small outbreaks in certain areas. So those are the three things that have caused the outbreak, if you ask me, and it's probably relatively equally spread between the three, and that you have the protests, you have the increase in testing. I think that the increase in testing explains the majority of it. It's probably about 50, 25, 25. Increase in testing is about 10 to 15,000 of the cases, and then you got about 5,000, give or take a little bit, between actual legitimate outbreaks um, and the protests. Basically, that's what, and not to mention too, there's going to be some crossover there as well. But anyway, again, like I really don't understand how people can look themselves in the mirror and be like, "Yep, 1 minute, yeah, the protests do have a link between the outbreaks, and the next minute they don't." Like I really don't understand it. We've went back and forth so many times. Like seriously, which one is it? So I really don't know. But anyway, I'm going to leave the video there. If you liked it, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email. I got linked in the description. Again, I appreciate any donations, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And last few things, check me out on Parlay. Check me out on Twitter. Check me out on BitChute. All those links are in the description, so you can find them all there.